Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is honestly one of the most baffling historical mysteries in modern sports. We are going to look at how exactly the most talented collection of footballers in English history managed to fail to win a single major trophy. I mean, we're talking about an era that was genuinely supposed to rewrite history, a time when football's coming home wasn't just a fun chant, it was a literal expectation. So let's jump right into this and figure out what went wrong. Just take a second to look at this roster. David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand. Wow. These guys weren't just stars. They were the absolute elite of European football in the early 2000s. They were dominating the Premier League and the Champions League with clubs like Manchester United, Liverpool, and Chelsea. Arguably, no national team had more raw talent packed into a single starting 11. So right off the bat, we know their repeated early tournament exits, definitely not due to a lack of individual ability, which begs a question. If this ridiculous group of players couldn't win, what on earth was happening behind the scenes? Well, this quote right here brilliantly illustrates the reality behind the facade. This is from former Liverpool and England captain Steven Gerrard, looking back on his time with that squad. He said, "I think we were all egotistical losers. We never at any stage became a real good, strong team." Ouch. That just instantly shatters the whole illusion of a unified dream team, doesn't it? Because underneath that glittering surface of world-class talent, there was a deeply, deeply flawed environment. So to really understand how this happened, we're going to systematically deconstruct this failure. First, we'll look at the immense expectations placed on this ultimate dream team. Then we'll examine how they were completely stuck in an outdated 4-4-2 tactical system. From there, we'll explore the toxic egos and club rivalries, dive into the crushing management and media pressure they faced, and finally, wrap up with the lessons modern football actually learned from this massive fall from grace. Section 1. The Ultimate Dream Team. A squad packed with world-class talent that won absolutely nothing. You have to understand, the hype surrounding this group in the early 2000s was just unprecedented. Every single tournament came with front-page headlines practically guaranteeing a victory. And, the pressure actually started at the very top of the organization. In 2001, former FA chief executive Adam Crozier officially branded this side the Golden Generation, and he boldly predicted they'd go on to win the 2006 World Cup. That specific label, it immediately put this completely unrealistic, suffocating burden on the squad. Frank Lampard actually pointed out later how ridiculous this was. Nobody was calling Italy or France a golden generation, even when they had absolute legends like Zidane and Pirlo playing. But for England, it set this baseline expectation of guaranteed global dominance. And honestly, all that did was stifle their creativity and instill a massive fear of failure. Section 2. Stuck in a 4-4-2. The tactical deficit of the early 2000s. Okay, so while club football all across Europe was evolving incredibly fast, the English national team was just stubbornly rigid. They relied way too heavily on the classic 4-4-2 formation. Now, if you're not a tactics nerd, basically this is a very traditional system that totally lacks specialized roles. It left zero real space for a creative number 10 and no room to accommodate modern inverted wingers. But crucially, it forced two dynamic box-to-box midfielders, Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard, to play right next to each other. Both of them instinctively wanted to bomb forward toward the goal, but neither had a disciplined positional anchor sitting beside them to protect the defense. Because of this, the midfield constantly looked fractured and outclassed whenever they played against elite, highly technical teams. And the flaws in this setup become glaringly obvious when you contrast England with the teams that were actually winning tournaments. Take a look at France in 1998 or Spain in 2010. Those teams featured incredibly fluid, specialized midfields, where every single player had a beautifully defined role that complemented the guys around them. Essentially, they built their entire formation around their players' specific strengths. England, well, they stubbornly kept trying to force their superstars to fit into an outdated 4-4-2 system, instead of tailoring the system to fit the generational talent they had sitting right in front of them. Former England winger Joe Cole honestly summed it up perfectly. He noted, "We had great players, but the system wasn't suited to international football. We relied on somebody popping up with a bit of magic." And he hit the nail on the head. Relying on individual brilliance to just magically bail you out of a tough spot, rather than having a cohesive tactical plan that you've drilled in training, that is simply no way to win an international tournament. And because the managers absolutely refused to adapt, it led to massive tactical casualties across the pitch. Like we talked about, Gerrard and Lampard were basically neutralizing each other in the center. Then you had Wayne Rooney, an explosive, generational talent, frequently deployed in systems that forced him to drop way deep just to create chances, instead of being free to operate near the goal where he was most dangerous. You had brilliant fullbacks like Ashley Cole and Gary Neville, restricted to highly traditional, predictable roles without any real tactical freedom. But without a doubt, the biggest casualty in all of this was Paul Scholes, who was awkwardly shoved out of position to the wide left just to make the formation work. Which is completely wild, and the tragedy of misusing Scholes is made so obvious by this quote from Sven-Göran Eriksson, the England manager at the time. He openly admitted, "Scholes was the most talented player I ever coached. He had everything." I mean, literal football gods like Zinedine Zidane and Xavi considered Scholes the absolute best central midfielder of his era. Yet, after being sacrificed and played completely out of position for years just to accommodate that 4-4-2, this generational talent retired early from international football in 2004. He was only 29 years old. He just walked away out of sheer frustration. Section 3. Egos and club rivalries. The toxic culture within the camp. Okay, so if the tactics were deeply flawed on the pitch, the culture off of it was just downright toxic. Deep-seated loyalties to their domestic clubs completely poisoned the national team environment. The squad was heavily fractured into these isolated little cliques based on fierce Premier League rivalries. It was basically high school cafeteria dynamics. You had the Manchester United set sitting at one table, the Liverpool boys at another, and the Chelsea players sticking strictly to their own. And remember, these weren't just average players. They were Ballon d'Or contenders and club captains who simply were not used to taking a backseat to anyone. So how can a team possibly thrive when the players feel way more loyalty and connection to their club than to their own country? The managers rarely made the bold decisions needed to break down those barriers, meaning genuine team bonding was practically non-existent. And Steven Gerrard's admission here really sheds light on just how bad it got. He confessed there was an underlying bitterness, a little bit of hatred among the players. It was a deeply isolating, unfriendly environment. He actually recalled spending up to 7 hours a day just sitting completely alone in his hotel room, feeling low, stating, "I didn't feel part of a team. I just wanted the games and then to be away." They never connected as teammates, period. And that total lack of unity inevitably bled right out into their performances on the pitch. Section 4. Management and media pressure. From a managerial carousel to an unforgiving spotlight. So, a toxic dressing room and outdated tactics are bad enough on their own, but when you combine them with off-pitch instability, you get a recipe for absolute disaster. Enter the chaotic managerial carousel. From 2001 to 2006, Sven-Göran Eriksson's man management was often seen as too soft to break down those club cliques or bench the big egos. After him came Steve McLaren, whose overly familiar approach, literally using players' nicknames in serious press conferences, ended in a humiliating failure to even qualify for Euro 2008. Panic setting in, the FA then swung wildly in the complete opposite direction, hiring the incredibly austere Italian manager Fabio Capello. Capello brought in this ultra-strict, tension-filled regime that completely lacked any personal connection with the players, which was only made worse by a severe language barrier. And Capello's tenure culminated in the spectacular, slow-motion car crash that was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. The team's remote base camp was literally described by player Peter Crouch as a luxurious prison where the guys just couldn't relax. After a massive goalkeeping error by Rob Green in their very first game, Capello awkwardly let the squad choose his replacement. That resulted in him playing David James, who Capello himself had shockingly referred to as Calamity James in the past. But the absolute nadir of his whole era was an abysmal, heavy-legged 0-0 draw with Algeria, which ended with an incredibly frustrated Wayne Rooney glaring directly into a TV camera and sarcastically mocking his own booing fans. The team was completely tailspinning at this point. And surrounding all of this on-pitch chaos was an incredibly suffocating environmental pressure. The British media hype was unprecedented, creating this intense must-win mentality that very quickly morphed into a paralyzing fear of failure. Add to that the relentless, frankly invasive tabloid scrutiny of the players' personal lives, which just constantly ate away at their resolve. And then, hovering over everything, was the crushing psychological weight of the dreaded penalty shootout curse. England didn't just lose shootouts. The sheer dread of them loomed over every single knockout match. It created immense anxiety before a ball was even placed on the penalty spot. Section 5. Lessons from the Fall. How failure paved the way for modern success. But look, history isn't just about analyzing what went horribly wrong. Recognizing the deep systemic failures of the golden generation, the FA actually made very conscious decisions about 10 to 15 years ago to fundamentally change English football. They started developing youngsters in proper, unified tactical systems from a very early age. They actively stopped relying on individual magic and started prioritizing the tactical unit as a whole. And crucially, under modern managers like Gareth Southgate, they actively fostered a positive, unified dressing room culture. Today, the players are tactically intelligent, they actually buy into a system, and most importantly, they genuinely enjoy being around each other. They've replaced those bitter club rivalries with real friendships and a shared national purpose. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to close out this explainer. Does individual brilliance truly matter if you can't build a cohesive team? England's golden generation had literally all the talent in the world, but without a unifying system, without tactical clarity, and without a selfless culture, they remain one of world football's most compelling cautionary tales. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.